Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be naming the top 10 worst bosses in the Soul series. So if you're new, make sure to like and subscribe, and let's get into the video. First off, you know I had to include some honorable mentions. There's two honorable mentions. The first one is Bed of Chaos. I don't know what the hate around this fight is. Everyone says it's by far the worst fight in Dark Souls Remastered, but I think it is mandatory, but it's not a hard fight whatsoever. I kind of enjoy a gimmick fight every now and then, and I don't even think it does a gimmick fight too bad. The only problem that I see people having with this fight is that they like fall off and hits them off. But the thing is though, there's only 3 things you have to break, and if you break one of them, 2 of them, it saves. So it's not like if you die, you have to restart this whole thing. And I can understand it's an annoying fight, but since it's not that hard, it's not that big of a deal. And the second honorable mention is Royal Rat Authority. This fight wasn't too annoying for me. I kind of enjoyed the little gimmick of you having to be smart with killing the little rats, but I can see it being really annoying because these are one of the fights where it doesn't seem hard, but you get ganked and raped and poisoned and killed within 5 seconds. So it's kind of annoying to a certain extent because it is a pretty hard boss fight, but it's optional, and I just kind of enjoy that fun little gimmick every now and then. Now to start off the top 10 is the DS3 Gank boss in the Poison DLC. The only reason I'm really including this in the top 10 is because I know I will get absolutely raped if I don't. Everybody absolutely despises this boss. I don't really get the hate, but I can see no one really enjoys a triple gank boss fight, especially since this fight is pretty uncreative. It's just 3 NPC-like regular enemies that are attacking you. And I think the run back to this boss fight is a giant aspect because it's like kind of a maze, and there's a lot of poison getting involved, so no one really likes that. And there's also a couple enemies in the arena that shoot poison at you, which, you know, nobody really fucks with poison, so I understand that. Number 9 are the Bellfry Gargoyles. This fight is kind of just lazy. It's a copy of the Dark Souls Remastered one, just lazier, less movesets, less attacks, and they just are overall lamer, and just tons of them. This is basically a bukkake boss fight. I mean, 5 big black gargoyles spawning on top of you, just jumping on you. It's not really a fun fight. It's kind of a fight that's just, the only reason you kind of remember it is in a bad way. It's like, you know, you panic, you get scared, it's stressful. That's the extent of this fight. It's not hard, but, you know, it's also optional, so that's why it's not too far down on the list. The last bad part about this fight is that you don't really feel accomplished or rewarded for beating it because you don't really get anything out of it, and it doesn't really feel like a boss fight since it's kind of just a basic enemy you're fighting. It's just kind of like a strong enemy you're fighting, which Dark Souls 2 does tend to do a lot by just using an enemy as a boss fight and then turning around a couple areas later and just making him a regular enemy there. The next one on this list is the Dragon God. I'd probably put it in the top 10, but since, you know, a lot of people hate it, you gotta take everyone's opinion into consideration since it is a ranking list. I think this boss fight is unique, but it doesn't really fit in with the Demon Souls atmosphere. It's kind of a long-paced, more boring gimmick fight, and that's really the extent of this boss fight. Nothing too notable, nothing too horribly bad about it. It's just an overall below-average boss fight. Now coming in at number 7 is the Godskin Duo. You knew this one had to be somewhere here in the list. This boss fight, it's bad, it's not horrible, but the one thing that makes it very low is that it not only is it mandatory, it's one of the hardest, by far hardest fights in the game. It's a gank boss that doesn't feel fair, really. They're both fast, even the big fat guy, he's fast, they have AoEs, they have long ranged, and they're just on you relentlessly. And this fight is annoying for practically all the wrong reasons. It is kind of fun, I'll give you that, but once you kill them both, they respawn, and they do that a couple times, which is pretty annoying. The run-up's not too annoying, but the fight is just so hard, even with summons, it just doesn't really feel fair. Now, I get you can cheese this boss with, like, the sleep pots or whatever, but no regular player is going to think to do that. And the last thing that's bad about this boss fight is it just fucking stresses you out. I think I aged about 20 years during this boss fight. In the number 6 spot is indeed a boss from Sekiro, the one and only boss from Sekiro that will be on this list. And that is the Guardian Ape gank fight. This fight, this is a theme you'll see a lot. It's just fights that don't really feel fair, especially gank fights. Now, I don't think this fight is too bad. I know you don't really remember it, but I just don't think it fits into Sekiro standards. Sekiro is a game of flawless bosses, and I think having a boss that is so bottom of the barrel compared to it just makes it have to be on this list. Gank fights are never fun, and especially in a game where Sekiro favors and pushes that mentality of one-on-one fights and duels, this just catches you off guard, and it's just not fair nor fun. For the number 5 spot, I think this is kind of a hot take because I've never heard anyone really talk about this, but that's Deacons of the Deep. This boss fight was just lame. It was basically like Royal Rat Vanguard. It's not a fun fight. I think the only reason no one talks about it is because it's a Dark Souls 3 boss fight. But this boss fight is literally just killing regular enemies, chasing after the regular enemy who's been affected or whatever it is. I mean, it's not absolutely horrible because it's a very easy boss fight, but I just think it's like more of a hassle. It's more of a chore to do. Just killing regular enemies like you're farming souls. And there's not really much to say about that boss fight. It's just a lame fight. On to the next. And speaking of the devil, it's Royal Rat Vanguard. This fight is exactly like Deacons of the Deep, just probably a little bit worse because it's a little bit more overwhelming and they're actually a little bit more damage, especially with the bleed. The bleed can be very annoying. Now, I think this fight is a little bit more fun than Deacons of the Deep, but it's also a lot more frustrating. It's one of those fights, just like the poison dog I was talking about earlier. It's like, you're doing great, you're doing well, you're killing all of them, and then within an instant, you die. That's because of the bleed and the overcrowding. When you're trying to get to that Mohawk rat, all these rats just come behind you and start biting your little butt, which is quite a pest. Now on to the big 3. I'm saying this like it's kind of an honor, but it's not. That's just how you gotta phrase things. In the number 3rd spot is the Ancient Dragon. This fight is just so long, hard, and tedious. The worst combo is having a bad boss that's boring, that's long, has a huge health pool, does tons of damage, and is super important to the game. And this boss checks off all those fucking check marks or whatever. This boss is very important to killing Vendrick, and this boss has the largest amount of health pool in the game by far. And the worst part about it is it's a process, it's a chore, because this boss does that one attack, it just flies in the air, shoots fire, lands on its feet, slaps you, and repeats the whole thing. So it takes about 20 minutes to do this, and if you get hit once, you're one-shotted, and you have to do that whole annoying process again. And one of the worst things about it is the run back. The run back takes you about 20 minutes, plus a 20-minute boss fight, you die, 40 minutes wasted of your life. And the worst part about it is this boss fight looks so cool. A giant dragon on this little platform in the middle of the sky. They did all this just for this fight to suck absolute ass. Now for the number 2 spot, I think this probably should be swapped with number 3, but it's the Stray Demon and the Fire Sage Demon. You might be wondering why this boss fight is so low. It's just a slightly below average boss fight. It's just, this boss has been replicated 3 times within Dark Souls Remastered. The Asylum Demon, then you fight the Stray Demon, then you fight the Fire Sage Demon. And nothing really changes. They add a little bit of a fire aspect to the Fire Sage Demon, but it is in aspect the same boss fight. I just hate how it's replicated. In Elden Ring, that's an excuse because it's a fucking humongous game with 200 bosses. But within Dark Souls Remastered, there's a total of 20 bosses, and 3 of those bosses being a repeat is absolutely crazy. And in the number 1 spot, drum roll, it's Prowling Magus. This is a pretty anticlimactic ending because, you know, usually it's like the best thing for last, but this boss fight, it doesn't even really feel like a boss fight. It's just you killing enemies. It's not even fun enemies. This game just got bottom of the barrel enemies that you wouldn't even be happy as fighting enemies. They got the bottom of the barrel enemies and put this as a boss fight and called it a day. Not only is it so uncreative, it's way too easy, it's a gank boss, and it's just regular enemies. Like, and when you beat this boss, you don't even feel accomplished or anything because you're just fighting regular enemies. This shouldn't even be considered a boss, and it's kind of disappointing that Dark Souls 2 just throws this shit together and calls it a boss. But that's it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and see you in the next one.